Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So today we have Dr. Gan Quan, who is the Director of Tobacco Control at the Union and at Vital Strategies. And he's leading the tobacco control program that operates in more than 20 countries. Dr. Gan joined Union in 2009 as a technical advisor and was the director of the Union China office from 2014 to 2016. He was closely involved in providing technical support to the cities in both smoke-free law adoption and implementation. Dr. Gan holds a PhD and an MS in Environmental Health Sciences from School of Public Health, University of California. Thank you so very much, Dr. Gan, for joining us. As you are aware, that STPI has been working in close collaboration with the Union and now with the Vital Strategies for the past many years. We have worked on graphic health warning, electronic and nicotine products, and now we are working on tobacco taxation also. So going straight on to my first question. As you're aware that out of all the empowered strategies, taxation is the least implemented around the world. How does the tobacco industry persuade the governments not to increase taxes global around?
First of all, thanks for having me. Really a pleasure to be here. It's a very good question. The tobacco industry really knows this is the most effective measure to control smoking, just like we do. So they're really trying everything they can to persuade the government this is not the way to go. So they would hire lobbyists to lobby the Ministry of Finance and sometimes Ministry of Health as well. The common arguments they would use is if you increase tax, then you lose revenue from illicit trade. And sometimes they also use the argument that if you increase tax, this will affect the livelihood of the poor, which is not true. We know that. So a lot of lobbying behind the scenes in each and every country, wherever, whenever we try to increase tax on tobacco products.
So you think that the smokers, they'll buy into tobacco control's argument that if we increase taxes,
I think we need to be mindful that the majority of the public do not smoke in all the countries around the world. Smokers are the minority. Of course, smokers usually are less supportive of tax increases for cigarettes. So because non-smokers are the majority of the public, so we have the public support of increasing tax. And sometimes smokers can also be on board, but you have to angle the advocacy in a way that, increasing tax really can protect the youth from picking up smoking. That's the very critical angle we have to use in advocacy to bring smokers on board. So I think that's really key. And on top of that, we often talk about in tobacco control, we need to use a package of tobacco control measures, and taxation is only one of them. You need to build smoke-free environment, ban advertising. All these together will raise awareness of smokers so that they can support all tobacco control measures, including taxation.
Regarding tobacco taxation, where the tobacco industry claims to be one of the largest taxpayers, how do the governments fare with that? Because they always, even in Pakistan, they continue to claim that we are one of the largest, if not the largest taxpayer, which is statistically not true, and many studies also exist. But how do we look at it, and how are other countries, low and middle income countries, looking at that? Because as you know, that almost 80% of the deaths because of tobacco, they are happening in low and middle income countries.
I think in a lot of low and middle income countries around the world, the level of taxation on cigarettes is still very low, meaning there's room to increase tax on cigarettes. Even in Pakistan, with a recent tax hike, there's still room to further increase tax. And we should be mindful. We shouldn't forget that because of COVID, the pandemic, a lot of countries have been struggling economically. You know, many LMICs are cash strapped, and increasing tax on cigarettes is probably a very sensible way for governments to collect revenue. You know, use the revenue on many things. So I think that's really the opportunity for us to further tax cigarettes during this time.
I'll bring in the graphic health warning also, and remaining focused on Pakistan. So, how do you see that tobacco control efforts are faring in Pakistan?
I really don't see Pakistan as very different from many other countries we work in. Um, Over the past 15 years, we know the progress has not been very, at a great pace when it comes to tobacco control. But I think we shouldn't forget that we have used the time of the past 15 years to build a critical mass of tobacco control advocates in the country, which is really the greatest asset we have. And this critical mass will continue to be impactful in the future. And I think in Pakistan, just like in many other countries, what we need is the right political opportunity, a committed leadership. And that's what we need. From this critical mass, we have the technical capacity. We know what are the right things to do to move tobacco control forward. So I think we just need the right moment, and when that right moment comes, we can provide the right technical support to the government to do the right things.
There is a lot of hue and cry by the tobacco industry that if you increase taxes on the legal tobacco products, there'll be an increase in the illegal or smuggled products. And I was looking at the internal revenue enforcement website in Pakistan, and they've registered almost 150 cases against the tobacco industry. This is very interesting that they are actually involved in smuggling and illegal products. So how do you see the role of the local illicit production as far as the taxation is concerned?
This is a very common argument the tobacco industry has been using in almost every country. I think very often they exaggerate the situation of illicit trade and trying to use that as an argument against raising tobacco tax. And sometimes they are all even engaged in the illicit trade, especially when they are trying to penetrate into a new market. That's what we have seen. So I think what the government really needs at the moment is really objective statistics on the situation of illicit trade, which is, I'm sure, is not as bad as the tobacco industry claims. So that really involves monitoring. When the government does not have the capacity to do that monitoring, this is where the civil societies can play an important role to do the monitoring, the price monitoring, and also the monitoring of the illicit trade in the country, and to provide that kind of evidence to the government to support and to counter the tobacco industry's claim. And when it comes to the illicit trade, this is not a tax issue. This is an tax administration issue. And Pakistan has done a lot when it comes to track and trace, and I think have a good system in place. And the tax revenue collected from this tax increase can always be used to invest to strengthen the track and trace system. So I think this is a win-win situation, and the government really needs the civil society support to continue this path.
As you are aware that Pakistan has a porous border, all around, and we see smuggled products from all over the world, especially from our neighboring countries, coming into the market. One of our tobacco control partners, they carried out the study of illicit as well as smuggled cigarettes, and they estimated that it's almost 15.9%, whereas tobacco industry continues to claim that it's more than 45%. Yeah. So how do you see that we should be trying to counter this narrative?
I really feel we are in a good position. I would say, in Pakistan, just like we just had the conversation before this interview, that I think there's a general feeling that in the next budget cycle, the tax on cigarettes will be kept the same. And I think that's a very good position we are in. And, I think the government's position, the Ministry of Finance position, should very much be appreciated. But I'm really looking to the next step. Even with this tax hike, the tax level of cigarettes in Pakistan is still below what WHO recommended as the optimal level. So there's still room for further tax increase. What we really need to do is to build up the evidence that, just like what you said, the illicit trade, because of this tax increase, is not as serious as the tobacco company claims. I think the government knows this, but they really need the evidence and the campaign support from civil societies to support them to counter the tobacco industry. So that's what they need, and that's, I think, what we need to do to support the government to continue this effort and to further increase tax on cigarettes.
Every year we are aspiring that the tax should go up. We have proposed that we should have a long-term tobacco taxation policy. Sure. And fiscal policy also. Are there any significant or particular advices that you would give us, or STPI, or the country as a whole?
I think that's very good perspective. The country should have a long-term policy on taxation. And I do feel there are country experience around the world that Pakistan can learn from on taxation. Just looking in the region, for instance, in Bangladesh, in Vietnam, and Philippines, where we work in, the government has applied very aggressive taxation policies on cigarettes. They applied a compulsory 1% tax on cigarettes, and what's good they have done is they applied this revenue to public health programs, including tobacco control. And in the Philippines, they used the revenue to support universal health coverage. So I think there are a lot of good lessons from the world that, besides a long-term progressive taxation policy, there's a very important question of how to use the revenue to sustain the tobacco control effort and to sustain healthcare. I'm sure in every country, the healthcare system is underfunded. So how to use the argument to support, incremental tax increase. I think there's a lot to be learned from many countries around the world.
We can see all these nicotine products and electronic smoking products or vaping products which have flooded the market. Is there any policy guideline or any way forward that Vital Strategies, or you as a health professional or tobacco control advocate, you would guide us or tell us?
About 4 years ago, the union published a position statement on electronic cigarettes and heated tobacco products. And our position is very clear. We think these products should be banned in low and middle income countries for the very simple reason that we've already got a tobacco epidemic, and these products will just sustain the nicotine addiction, and especially they will be attracting youth. And I think we are seeing it happen more and more in more and more countries, including Pakistan, the way these products are promoted, marketed. it's very clear their target consumer base is the youth. So we remain very concerned about what will happen in countries including Pakistan. And we are very conscious, the tobacco and vaping industry, they are hiring lobbyists using what is being promoted in the countries like the UK and requesting countries like Pakistan to replicate that practice. But we know the context is totally different. Context matters a lot. So our position is very clear. We feel electronic cigarettes and heated tobacco products, including the nicotine pouches, velos, these so-called novel products, should be banned in countries like Pakistan.
How do you see? I mean, there is some influence from the legislators or policy circles on the tobacco growing and tobacco promotion in Pakistan also. So how should we mitigate this influence that comes from either from the government or from the policymakers or the legislators?
Yeah, I mean, China is probably not the best example when it comes to this. We have a tobacco industry extremely powerful. So because of that, we haven't made a lot of progress in tobacco control policies in China. In each and every country that we work in, there's a constant power wrangling between the tobacco industry and the Ministry of Health and the tobacco control advocates. Whenever there's a strong political leadership in tobacco control, then we may make progress in tobacco control. Otherwise, we may see less progress. But I think there's still things we can do to control the influence the tobacco industry can have on tobacco control policymaking. And I'm thinking of the FCTC Article 5.3 policy, which is to prohibit any influence the tobacco industry can have on tobacco control policymaking, including interactions between tobacco industry and government officials. So I think that policy can help to a certain extent to protect tobacco control policymaking from the influence of tobacco industry. So we have been trying to promote this policy in many countries we're working. I think a good place to start with would be the Ministry of Health, where people will be more receptive to this kind of policy. And once the Ministry of Health has adopted this policy, then you can try to expand the coverage of the policy to the entire government system. So I do feel that's the way to go. And also, you need to ban the corporate social responsibility, so-called CSR activities. Very often the tobacco industry uses these activities as a venue to influence the government. So I think these two policies can really help to curb the influence of the tobacco industry.
On World No Tobacco Day, we attended the launch of the Pakistan's tobacco control strategy. You think that document is sufficient, or that should continue to grow? And like you mentioned about corporate social responsibility also. So we have been observing here that tree plantation or things like that. Tobacco industry is always involved in that, and that tobacco control strategy also takes care of that. But do you think that document is comprehensive enough?
I think it's a very good starting point. I know many tobacco control advocates in the country have been trying to promote the idea, and trying to work on the document itself for many, many years. I think it's a very good starting point. And I do feel also this is the foundation for many future-oriented policies and regulations. I do feel this is very comprehensive, but this is only a starting point. And from this strategy, there's many things we can do. For instance, one of the things we can do is to build a national tobacco control program with with tobacco control cell at the Ministry of Health taking the lead, but every province should also have a counterpart, and maybe including the districts as well. And many policies, just like you mentioned, can also come out of the national tobacco control strategy. So I think this is a very good start, but certainly this is not the end point, but our starting point as well.
Is there any specific advice for the vital strategies or tobacco control partners that we have in Pakistan that you would want to give, and how do you foresee Pakistan going forward?
I do feel we have done a lot of work in tobacco control in Pakistan over the past 15 years. Also, we have well-trained tobacco control advocates. We have raised the awareness of tobacco control among government officials and among the public as well. So we have done a lot. We have certain policies passed. We have the TAPS ban. We are in a fairly good position when it comes to tobacco taxation as well. But I think there's still a lot more work to be done. From the union's and vital strategies perspective, we are really keen on promoting enforcement and implementation of existing policies and regulations. Because without enforcement, the policies are just on paper and there's no impact. And I do feel without extremely strong political leadership on tobacco control, which I think is probably the moment we are in the country, this is exactly the opportunity where you can do other things like implementation of the existing policies, building systems from the national tobacco control strategy by building a functional national tobacco control program. These things we can do even from the subnational level, from the provinces. So I do feel there's a lot more to be done, and there's a lot we can do at this moment. So I still remain pretty optimistic about the future of tobacco control in the country. I do appreciate, I think this trip, I from my interaction with the tobacco control advocates, I do feel this is a very passionate and very committed community. So all the good reasons for us to be optimistic.
On the behalf of STPI, I'm really grateful that you spared this time with us today. Thank you very much. Thank you.